In this lecture, I just want to finish up talking about police discretion, say a little bit about the issues that have been raised in the other lectures. And I just want to tell you guys, I don't have a sort of neat, clean answer for these issues. This is the right way to handle it. You know, the reason I talk about this is I think it's important, but I also think it's a very hard issue. I think there's a lot going on both sides of it. And, you know, I wouldn't ever claim to say, okay, here's the neat, clean, obvious answer, how we ought to deal with the problems raised by police discretion. So, what should we do? Well, it's complicated, right? I don't think there's ever an issue or that it's ever a real possibility to get rid of police discretion entirely. You know, it's just, I don't think it would ever be possible to say police have to enforce every single law that they see, and if it's broken, they have to pull people over or, you know, write them up. You know, they're just, you know, enforcing every single law, I think would be stupid in a lot of cases. You know, think back to my case of me having the flu, getting pulled over, being let off, right? And I think Del Pozo's right. You know, in a lot of cases, it is better if the cops can negotiate with people. Hey, please stop doing this. I'm going to give you a warning. Don't make me arrest you. Than it is if they have to drag everyone in or write them a ticket, right? But on the other hand, even if we say, okay, we can't get rid of police discretion, I think there's a real question about whether we use it too much, whether we allow too much in our system. Just a few examples. Should we allow less discretion in sting operations and the like? I don't claim to be an expert on policing. You know, I don't have any real background in law enforcement or criminology, so I am not an authority on this. But I do get the feeling, and again, not an expert, but this is a worry of mine. I do wonder if we might not, as a society, use sting operations, undercover operations a bit much. I think we should be very, very skeptical about these kind of operations, and we should make sure the police are using them as a last resort. If you can gather this information another way, well, maybe you should, right? There's a real worry here. Maybe not prohibit them, but there should be a sort of skepticism, a sort of oversight on this. Should there be more restrictions on proffer deals, right? Where you let people off for becoming an informant or whatever. You know, I think it's almost impossible to deny that there should be more restrictions on this, right? You know, think about the example in the podcast where someone is made to perform oral sex on a police officer, or not, on a crooked cop, right? That just goes beyond the pale, right? I don't see how that should ever be allowed. So I think, you know, what those restrictions would look like, I don't know. Again, I'm not a criminologist. I don't have a background in law enforcement. But some of the stuff that the Supreme Court has allowed, like that forcing someone to perform a sex act, to entrap a, you know, maybe not entrap in the legal sense, but to get a crooked cop, that goes too far, and I think it's hard to argue that that shouldn't be banned and things like that shouldn't be banned, right? Bigger questions. Should police have less role in enforcing mala prohibitum crimes generally? Do police do too much to enforce, say, traffic laws? You know, I mean, I'll be honest. A lot of like traffic laws like speeding, you wouldn't even need the police out there at all to enforce, right? I don't know where else in the world does this, but in Germany, they usually don't bother to have cops patrolling the roads. They have like these little machines that have radar on them. You know, I don't know what it's set at. It's not set at exactly the speed limit, but if you go by it too fast, they'll usually hide these around curves or behind bushes or whatever. If you go too fast, there's just an automatic thing on the machine. Pop, flash goes off, it takes a picture of your plate. You get a ticket in the mail a few months later. I know this. I lived in Germany for a while. I was riding with a friend of mine. He went way too fast for a curve, and like, poof, flash. He knew he had a ticket in the mail, right? Look, couldn't we do that for a lot of traffic enforcement? Not have police out there for it? Not make it an issue of human judgment? I think probably so, right? But, just even more generally than that, think about drug laws, right? We will talk about this a lot more when we get to the unit on drugs. This will come up again, right? Do police focus too much on enforcing laws against drugs and drug use? I'll come back to this in the unit on drugs and drug abuse. I think the answer is probably yes. We'll need to say a lot more about, what the aim of drug enforcement is and what we need to do to accomplish that. But, I'll come back to this when we talk about drugs in the next unit. I think a lot of what we're trying to do, prevent or minimize drug use, could probably be done with a lot less enforcement of drug laws. Drug laws are mala prohibitum. So this is something I think Del Pozo and Hunt would both agree on. Drug laws should maybe not be such a priority for police departments. We'll talk about ways that could be in the next section. But I think that if you're worried about police discretion, less role in enforcing mala prohibitum crimes, drugs being a big one of those that we could maybe have less of a role for, that might be one way to deal with these worries. Finally, and this hooks up pretty closely with the issues with drug laws, but I'm less strong on this one. But I do wonder, isn't there a lot to be said for making police need a warrant to search a car rather than just allowing them to do it on probable cause? Now, I think there has to be limits. Look, if someone's driving and they reek of alcohol and they open the door and fall out in the street and bottles of liquor come out after them, you can't make the police need to get a warrant to subject this guy to a breathalyzer, right? He'll be sober by the time you get a warrant, right? So there needs to be some intelligent, enforcement here. The same maybe for suspicions of people actually driving on other drugs. But do the police actually need to be able to tear your car apart without a warrant to effectively enforce the law? Again, this comes back to the war on drugs, but the whole reason they allowed this was prohibition. Prohibition is not generally remembered, and I think for good reason, as one of the smartest experiments America ever went in for. So, I think on this one there maybe needs to be a rethink of how much we should allow police or other law enforcement to search people's cars without a warrant, right? To just search it on suspicion. The Supreme Court seems to have approved that. They seem pretty comfortable with it. For me, just morally, that seems an odd thing. That seems a bit too much discretion. Constitutionally, how in the world, especially given the importance of cars in American society, how in the world can you claim that allowing the police to tear apart someone's car on suspicion of probable cause fits with the Bill of Rights restrictions on search and seizure? I just don't see it. I mean, maybe the Supreme Court justices are just smarter than I am. I think this is one of those cases where they're being, as one of my professors said, sometimes people are too clever to be truly intelligent. My suspicion is the justices were being too clever to be truly intelligent on this one. But, that's just my opinion on this. All right, so anyway, those are just some thoughts on police discretion. If we are worried about this, how we might deal with it. Some of these are going to come up again, especially when we get to the unit on drugs, drug laws and drug abuse, and drug addiction, which will be the next unit we cover. Of course, we do have a little bit more to do in this unit. I want to talk about some issues of punishment, to finish up.